the things that I've been learning and experiencing as it relates to using Flare in an Agile environment will be useful to somebody. So we'll just dive in. So let me advance here. I just wanted to kind of upfront set some expectations. My experience in Agile has been most intense at the company I work for now, where we've made a major shift from sort of a waterfall dev environment to an Agile environment. And so my experience is based on that over the last couple of years. And our audience may be similar to yours, but our audience are IT administrators and software developers. Maybe like you too, we're extremely disconnected from our customers, so it's difficult to know what their real world is like, except through some usability we've been able to do a little bit here and there, but we don't have the budgets for like site visits. Maybe you have had that blessing and opportunity, but not where we work. So the goal here today is to basically share a method for developing documentation that's more in step with the Agile process. And we'll talk a little bit about Agile, and I'll dive a little bit into what I mean when I say Agile, because there are a lot of flavors of Agile out there. So kind of some leading questions to get us into this is, first of all, how can I develop content faster? You know, in an Agile environment, if you're doing a 2-week sprint, how are you keeping up with that? How are you doing all that stuff we used to do in a waterfall environment of researching it out, asking all the questions you need to ask, and then developing your content, and then getting it reviewed in time for the end of the sprint when you should be in lockstep with development. And of course, always a question never to forget is just the quality of your content. How do you ensure that you're not losing quality because you're going faster? And then, you know, this question of keeping up with Agile development, are the tools that you're using or the processes you're using sufficient so that you're keeping the quality and keeping up with what your dev teams are doing? So here's where I'm going to kind of focus my answers to those questions today. Basically, if you've been in TechCom for a long time, no doubt you're familiar with content models and information types. Different companies I've worked at have approached content models in different ways. Some don't even talk about content modeling. Others were go very in depth and spend a lot of cycles and digging into what their content model should be. I think that a content model is kind of at the core of dealing with Agile development. And then from there, your content model, once you've defined it, you need to develop templates and styles that support that content model. And finally, streamlining your technical review process wherever you can so that you can basically harness the greatest value out of your subject matter experts. So the rest of this presentation is going to kind of focus on those three concepts. So first of all, setting the page for kind of getting on the same page about what Agile is. I'm guessing that if everybody here today could kind of take a minute and express what Agile means to you and what it's like in your environment, we'd probably have quite a few different answers. But going right to the manifesto for Agile software is basically, in Agile, you're supposed to value working software over comprehensive documentation, rather than spending a lot of cycles using spreadsheets and using specifications that can be hundreds of pages long. It's more about the interaction between developers with the focus on getting your software to be what it's supposed to be. The core value in Agile is access to think about how much and which kinds of documents are needed and when they need to be written. And obviously, this is a statement, again, about project documentation, but it's a great question to be asking myself as a technical writer, what kinds of docs are needed and, you know, how much is needed. And then the sprints that I mentioned earlier, if you're new to Agile, this will be new to you, obviously, but discrete chunks of time in which to build shippable features. So at our company, we use 2-week cycles. I know other companies may use more or less than that. I think 2 weeks is probably close to the bottom of the barrel for a turnaround, but nevertheless, the point is it's a short amount of time to develop a discrete section or set of features, and by the end of that cycle, those features should be shippable. Okay, so consider this, that modular content, topic-driven content, fits the Agile process extremely well. And if you're an Agile process and you're using Flare, you may be saying, well, duh, that's what we do. Well, exactly right. But think about the value of that, breaking your content down into small chunks, and how that fits with your dev team who's now developing, 3 features, one at a time, and you've got 2 weeks to finish it, and how modular content fits that very, very well. So you can more easily connect your content with users in just these consumable bytes using something like context-sensitive help or small topics. And then, of course, depending on how you develop that content, you should be able to reuse those bytes whenever you need them. And maybe you are already doing that as well. But the point is, the greater the modularity of your content, the more mileage you get out of your content. And, of course, the caveat there is that you also have to manage more pieces. So there's more to track. In the end, that's proven not to be a problem for us. In fact, it's a huge win. So if you're familiar with Flare already, maybe there are people here who are like looking at Flare for the first time. Flare is totally designed to be a modular topic-based content from the bottom up, and that's one of the reasons we've adopted it where we work. It's a topic-based structure with features like snippets and conditions, the linking functionality that does a lot of the management of those links, making sure they're working and flagging when they're not, is amazing. And then, of course, your ability to create TOCs or outlines on the fly and then embed those within each other makes for a very modular environment. And if you've used browse sequencing yet, if you haven't used browse sequencing yet, it's also a cool feature where you can actually set up, just basically go out and pull down topics randomly out of your plethora of content and just plug those together into a different sequence to present to your users almost on the fly. So Flare is a very modular product, allows you to create modular documentation, which fits the idea of a content model, which we'll get a little more into here. So now I want to just talk for a few minutes about content models. Like I said at the beginning, perhaps you've used content models before, maybe you haven't. I just want to give kind of a brief explanation of what I mean by content model. I feel pretty passionate about the fact that content models really are the key to quality and productivity. It's not just, to me, a buzzword, but it actually is invaluable to allowing us to do the things we do at our company, where we have a small staff, but we have huge requirements. And if we weren't writing in this way, I don't think we'd probably survive the onslaught of features that go out the door every release. So basically, content models, and again, if you're familiar with content models, please bear with me as I go through this quickly, but they enable support of Agile by modularizing your content, quicker content development cycles. If you have a content model, you get through these cycles more quickly because you know what's there and how it's broken down. Consistent content creates customer confidence. You've probably heard the term signposts. Customer comes in and they're used to always seeing information presented in a certain way, and information can always be found in a certain place. They become more comfortable with your content, come to know where things are, and therefore your success rate is higher because they're able to find what they're looking for. When we're designing our content model, we kind of follow this basic model, and just think of it as like an iceberg approach, where you see at the tip of the iceberg is more reference material, and as you move down deeper into the iceberg, the breadth and scope of that content becomes more broad, more instructional in nature maybe. So at level 1, it may be screen tips or screen text and tool tips or error messages, etc. But the point is it's little detail. So it could even be a context-sensitive help that pops up and all it does is describe what's on your screen, but just very little detail. And then as you dig deeper, that detail broadens to include more in-depth context-sensitive topics Maybe also include some quick reference guides or support articles, things that go a little more in depth. And then at the deepest, and yes, this is supposed to say level 3, are your full help topics, complete user guides, training materials, and so forth. And this should be your greatest detail. But the point is, you're giving customers a way in. You're giving them just a little bit of information, but you're not shutting the door on it at that point. You're giving them a path to drill deeper and deeper. So you can design a content model that actually allows that, that creates that path for the customer, from exposing them to a little information to giving them all the information they need or want. So when you're designing a content model, I'm going to walk through this kind of quickly, but basically you just identify what your common information components are that found in your content, sometimes called information types. You create your content model, define what are those different information types that make up your larger model, define your supporting styles, how that information is going to be presented, and then you would build your templates that reflect that model. So you may have a user's guide, online help system, a quick start guide, training guide, and then as you look through those and scan through those, you start to see these common elements within each of those. Those then kind of reveal themselves as information types that are inside your product. Whether you thought of a content model or not, these more than likely exist. So you can identify those, and then you can put your model together and be more explicit about it. If you look at this table on the right, that first column just shows information types that we identified. So there are procedures, there are troubleshooting type topics, etc. And if you plan to reuse content, the right side of the table reveals all of the different deliverables and which of these information types might appear in that. This seems like an exercise of futility, but it's really not, because once you go through this, you begin to get a picture of how you're going to reuse content. And once you have that understanding, then you can build a content model that should last you a long time. So you can keep refining it over time, but it will make a good splash for your customer. So here's some quick content model principles to live by. You just keep your content model as simple as you can. Getting too complex, it actually can make things more difficult, especially down the road as you're trying to maintain it. So just keep it very simple. And one content model I worked on before we had procedure type topics, and we had conceptual and reference. These are common things you've heard in DITA and other things. Nevertheless, they work. And that was all we had. Really, actually, we only had the concept and the topic, or the concept and the task-based information types. So a myth about content models is that they kill creativity, and I've not found that to be the case at all. If anything, they actually enhance creativity, because you can more easily see the landscape of information you're developing and then make enhancements from there, and get creative, expand your model if you need to. So now you've got your content model defined, and you've done this and you've thought this out. You know what each of your information types are. You know at the topic level what kind of information you're going to produce. And now in order to kind of set up an environment in which you can more quickly keep in lockstep with the Agile process, you need to create obviously supporting templates and the CSS styles that are going to support those templates. So here's an example real quick. Here's a topic in Flare. We created the topic. We may not have it. This looks, more like a conceptual type topic. We put in some placeholder text, and this is probably overkill. All you need is just a line, and then just define what the styles are, and then you just save it in Flare out as a template. And you've probably done that before, but Flare supports that ability to save any file type out as a template that you can then go into later and just open up and use like you would a template in Word or any other product. So here's an example of where I wanted to add a new topic. If you look at the list in the new from template box there in the middle, you can see that I've selected a CSH type or style topic. That's my information type is this particular CSH topic. Give it a name and then add it, and you're done. And if you save these templates out on a network share somewhere, then other authors can use the same set of templates, which really helps to keep things consistent across your content development process. So here's, now that I've created it, you can see it comes up in this way. I add my content and I move along quickly. So I'm thinking again of an Agile experience where I'm meeting with my stand-up teams in Agile every day, and say today we talked about the DigiShirt driver, and I learned some things during the stand-up. I got a contact, subject matter expert who maybe just implemented this. I set up some time to go meet with him. I take my laptop with me. I've already got this topic created and up in front of me, and I can sit down with that person and whip out what I need in just 10, 15 minutes of his or her time. And so I've saved a lot of time for me. I've saved time for them, and I'm in lockstep with the Agile process and heading along with them towards the finish line in 2 weeks. So it's important, too, to keep templates in line. And I just mean that, like it says here, templates should reflect your content model, not the other way around. It's easy to sort of just start developing content kind of willy-nilly and losing that connection with what your content model is. And then you end up with a mess. It's sort of like having a wiki experience. It just pretty soon information is growing like weeds, and you've broken your content model, and now you've really got a mess on your hands in Flare with all kinds of topics and new styles, and you have to avoid resist that temptation to let your information drive your model. And so while it takes time to kind of keep your content model in sync with your templates, it totally pays off. It's totally worth it. Sometimes I get a little anxious about trying to keep up with the Agile process, and suddenly we've got a need for some new information type. I want to just start writing it. But it's the same thing as it is on the development side. You have a developer who has some idea, he wants to just go out and create it without really consulting anyone or without talking to the architect team to make sure that he's not going outside of the framework. It's a similar concept in my book for content development. You've got to toe the line and make sure that you don't fall prey to that, or you'll be in a quagmire at some point. So templates are really the key to keeping pace in the Agile environment. So as I gave that example where I'm meeting with a subject matter expert based on a stand-up discussion, without that template, I've got to then take the time to figure out how I'm going to present this information, open up maybe a new blank file and waste time trying to figure out how I'm going to present the information. So I kind of call Flare's Red Bull his CSS. The power of CSS, because it really is kind of the creative power inside of Flare. And the more you know CSS, the better off you'll be. As far as there are a lot of things CSS can do beyond even it's not just about making the font pretty, or the layout of your page nice. That's all great, but there are other things that CSS can do. I give it as an example here, using the next class, so that when say I put in a head 2 somewhere and I press enter and I'm an author and I'm in an Agile environment, I'm trying to quickly develop content. If I use MC class and it specifies the next class, I want a body paragraph to follow my head 2, press enter, it automatically goes to that. If I didn't specify that in my style sheet, I have to manually then go over to the styles and select what the next style is going to be. That's one of many little tricks and shortcuts you can use through CSS just by learning a little more about it. I have some other suggestions here about intuitive names for styles for other authors so they know what p.body would mean, so they're not wasting time trying to figure that out. And then, of course, you can add usage guidelines, and Flare 10 lets you actually add some descriptive text to each of those styles, which is helpful to authors. I've had times where an author comes to me and says, I don't get what this is for, or sometimes they use styles in ways they weren't intended, and that creates problems when you begin to change those styles with the expectation that you're changing that style within a certain context, and maybe used it in a different context, and then it messes things up. So just a tip there is to just know CSS and just learn a little every day. I went out and got the missing manual as one example. You can just go online and look up this stuff. I've really appreciated Scott Delose's book, CSS to the Point. He just has I liked it because he has a lot of very specific Flare-specific tips and tricks you can use. So it's just a fun book to flip through and see what's possible and to kind of feed your imagination. So now what about streamlining technical reviews and contributions in an Agile environment? So I've written that content, I met with that developer, and now it's time to get some feedback and then to implement that feedback. And those of you who've been in tech writing for a while, you may have been around when you pretty much had to print out your content, and you may print out 100 pages or something and take it to and duplicate that 6 times to take it out to 6 different subject matter experts, and then bring all those handwritten content back in and rekey them into your computer with the realization that you can hardly decipher what was written in the first place. And then those reviewers can't see what each other have done either, unless, of course, you have them swap, which you can do. But it's a lengthy process. And then when PDFs became more popular, you still have the issue of sending those out, getting them back in, and copying and pasting from their notes, or at least reviewing their notes and pulling the content back in. So how do you streamline that to keep up in an Agile environment? So this is just, if you're a relatively new technical writer, this is just a basic flow of where the author writes a draft, hands it off to one or more technical reviewers, subject matter experts, comes back to you, you implement those things. You may repeat that a couple, 3 times even to get a second and third draft until you finally sign off, hand it off, and then you've got to go through the whole production process, unless you're lucky enough to have a whole production team, which some of you are and some of us aren't. So what about Agile technical reviews? What do we do? So since it's modular content, like we've been talking about this whole time, then your tech reviews could be modular as well. So that's one of the great advantages of writing in smaller chunks of information. You can send out smaller, discrete chunks for review, and that means quicker turnaround time. So your reviewer has less to look at. He's not given the brick on his or her desk, and they have to go through this when they're trying to meet their 2-week deadline as well. They're getting just a sip, a little bite of information. A second thing there is to basically choose the right tool and the format. If it's not easy to get content and to review it, it's going to be very difficult for your reviewers to get to the content at all. Or if they do get to it, they're going to be very quick and terse, and at least in my experience, sometimes really say almost nothing except notice that you left some punctuation out, which is not why you're doing a tech review. So you really have to make the process as simple as possible, and that's why the tool you use can be really critical. So you need to basically, some basic things that have helped me is locking down styles and local formatting so they're not monkeying around with that kind of thing, which always slows you down later. Say in the case of Word, if you send out content in Word, how do you prevent them from making changes? Obviously, that's not a problem in PDF, but you want to keep your styles that you allow them to use as they're making changes, if they even mess with the styles, but you want to keep those simple as possible too. And then show contributors and reviewers how to use your tools and processes. I think sometimes as tech writers, we throw stuff out there. We don't give a lot of time to wanting to take some time with our reviewers to show them the ropes a little bit. I've had success with this where I've sat in the room with 6 or 7 or 8 subject matter experts and just spent 30 minutes saying, here's the review process. When you get this, this is what you need to do. Don't do this, please do that, and then get it back to us. We'll take care of the rest. And it was amazing how just a single 30-minute walkthrough of the process suddenly made the comments more meaningful and the turnaround time more brief. So there's great value of just taking a little time to do that. So maybe you are familiar with MadCap Contributor. I kind of see it as for me personally, an integral component of using MadCap Flare. And the reason is this, what you're looking at on your screen, is the fact that I can go into my outline or my table of contents. I can select any random number of topics, right-click it, and hit Send for Review. It packages it up, as you see on the right side of the screen, and I can ship it off. Here's a quick little video. You can see I'm going to come down and select OpenSSL. These 4 topics. I'm going to then package those up. So I slowly find where the link is. And it's already packaged it for me. I can also specify the target output I want it to use. In this case, we're using HTML5. It's telling me I've already sent these out for review. I'm going to say yes, send them again. Have an option here to compose a message specific to this particular review. And then I'm going to come down and select a couple of reviewers I know that need to look at this. And then I send it. And they get that in an email. And then using Contributor, they're able to open it. And this is kind of what they may see. So these are different topics than what I chose. But if you look at this, this would be what your reviewer sees. And you could see that in this particular case, I'm running the free version of Contributor because a lot of your reviewers, you may just want them to give you brief comments like they would do in a PDF. It's very much like a PDF review. They can insert comments and then when they're done, save it, send it back, and you get those comments, and then you can import those. So the cool thing is they can also see where the content falls within your larger table of contents. So I have sent stuff out where the user didn't know this was a feature, and they were frustrated because they didn't understand what they were reviewing in context of the bigger picture. And they don't have to do that. They can actually open this table of contents view and see where things fall. And then they can proceed to add their comments and so forth. So why Contributor? I don't work for MadCap. I'm not trying to sell you on Contributor. I'm telling you that as a technical writer working in the field, I've found that this saves a tremendous amount of time. And so the track change feature, if you're used to that in Word, you have that in Contributor. I found that my reviewers are able to open content. They're familiar. They're comfortable with track changes, those who are using the licensed version of Contributor. They go through, they make comments, they delete stuff, they add stuff, and when it comes back to me, I have the option to go through those quickly and accept or reject, just like you've experienced in Word as well, and then it's pulled back into the master document in a matter of seconds. So comments are imported. All those bubbles, those come in and stay in my master document as well until I delete them or whatever. And there's no deciphering a reviewer's scribbles like you'd have to do in, say, a paper review. I don't have to try to figure out what they're saying. So here's an example of kind of an extreme case where content was submitted. It was kind of older content. You can see that in the first comment that this reviewer made, that this is old content. And it was awesome because this guy was very knowledgeable, and he went to town and set me straight on, oh, I had no idea how outdated this information was. It was a topic I didn't write originally and had been sort of hiding in the cracks. Well, now I have all this information before me, and I was able to very quickly just go through. I trusted what he said, but yet I was able to do my copy edit and a substantive edit to kind of bring it up to speed, and we're done. It was very quick. So kind of some lessons learned with Contributor. So it's true that not all subject matter experts are up to the task of installing and learning yet another tool, even if it's a brain-dead simple one. They're stressed, as you know, and they have a lot on their plate. They don't have a lot of time to sit there trying to figure out how to use your tool. And the case in point was that TOC view that frustrated a couple of reviewers. They're like, I don't get where this even belongs or what this has to do with. And some of that spoke to our content model wasn't perfect at that point. Topics should be able to stand on their own. They shouldn't have had to ask that. But nevertheless, sometimes that's still the case. And when once I showed them that feature, they were fine. But second bullet point there, you have to be prepared to support your tool. And it doesn't matter if it's Capture or Word or just about anything else. I suppose the exception is PDF. I don't know if it gets any simpler than that, but you need to be prepared to support in case there are issues. And then finally, I mentioned earlier, but there are the paid and free versions of Contributor. This can be confusing because if you are using the free version and you launch it, it's simple, but in a moment where a developer is just trying to get this review done, and he's presented with these free options when he launches Contributor, the third of which is free mode. they're not really sure. And if you've done due diligence and sat down and trained them 30 minutes to show them this is what you do, this can be avoided. But it can cause people to just sort of not do it. Open it, and then you have to talk to them later and tell them you haven't received content yet, and then they tell you that's why. So just a bonus comment about Agile and technical review. We happen to be using MadCap Pulse, which we use primarily to try to kind of diminish that gap I mentioned at the start of the presentation, how we're out of touch with our customers. So Pulse gives us a little bit of a window by doing some basic user analytics, search results, telling us the top search strings that produced no results, etc. But another cool thing about Pulse used internally is the fact that we have a doc staging server. We publish to daily, and that way all of QA, anybody in the company, if they see something that looks funky to them, and people are referencing it because they're trying to learn the new features, and we're trying to keep lockstep with Agile so they can see what's being written, that they can actually go in there and create a task. And where they go down to the bottom of a topic, they hit task and they assign it to me or to my colleague, and we're able then to see their comments in context and see what the issue is and fix it rather quickly. So just kind of a bonus comment there. Here's an example. If you look at the bottom of this screenshot, discussions about this topic section is the Pulse-enabled section, and you can see that they can type a status, a question, an article, or a task. And if they choose task, they can specifically say, send that to Derek, and then I'll get a notification, an email that somebody commented here, and I can come and look at it and make the correction. And in this particular instance, it was very useful, apparently. Where the steps were off because the UI had changed and I didn't know it. So that was extremely valuable to me. So have you ever considered using SMEs as authors? Probably, maybe everybody has. But there's, I guess, because a developer has of their own written something up. Maybe you asked them a lot of questions and they thought it would be easier to jot something down. But have you ever thought of actually harvesting subject matter experts to get them to contribute on a regular basis? Have you ever had success doing that? The secret is making contributions simple and easy, which is kind of what I've been talking about this whole time, is you can make it as simple, dead simple as possible for them to get in and get out. That they'll be happy. SME contributions can mean more useful and technically accurate content. So that's worth the weight right there in gold. I mean, if you can be given a piece of content that's by and large accurate, but just needs to be simplified a little bit so it communicates a little more clearly, then you've just saved yourself quite a bit of time trying to understand what you're documenting. SME contributions can free you up to do other things. So if you are getting content, then it allows you to be editing rough content into better content that will end up being more technically accurate than if you were to have to, get up to speed. A little caveat here, or a side note, is just that it's true. If I'm working on a product that's really not that technical, this may or may not be of much value. But if you're working on products that are very technical, my current job has to do with managing keys and certificates, and it can get rather technical, and having a subject matter expert basically explain to you or write something down for you to begin with saves a brutal amount of time, and so it's worth the time. So a quick comment about just a quick case study is working on a global financial tool. It was a brand new tool. This was at a previous job. We had huge resource limitations. Started out as one tech writer. Late in the process, we ended up with a second tech writer. And we had 15 subject matter experts. These are the people who would be using the new financial system, but they were very familiar with the financial process, and the new system was reflecting that process. So we were able to actually harness those subject matter experts, actually having them using Word templates where we had our content model defined where they could either write a conceptual content or topic or a task-based topic. That's all they had to worry about because it was simple, because we trained them, because we were able to get buy-off from management, from their managers to spend X amount of time each week. We were able to document this entire new product with 1.2 tech writers and those 15 subject matter experts. So I kind of mentioned some of these, but just get manager support, provide some simple templates and styles, train them on the use of those templates, basically just make it as easy as possible, and you may find that you've saved yourself a lot of grief and a lot of time as well. And I have to mention money for the company. So here's a bonus slide for you again. When MSWord is all that you've got, you can do some of these same things in Word as part of your Agile review process, where basically you create Word templates with styles that sort of match your Flare templates and styles. You don't have to. It's just easier because you're thinking about both, and when you're importing stuff back into Flare, if the styles are all named differently and the content model is different, it gets rather confusing. So just mirror what you've defined in your content model. Again, that model's got to drive your whole structure. Then lock down local formatting, limit your styles to just those that you want them to use, and then train them on how to use them. So here's an example of a Word-based template. You can see, first of all, that the local formatting bar is grayed out. That's something you could do. This is, I believe, Word 2010. You can actually go in and disable that. If you didn't know that, you can. And so you don't have the mishap of them applying local formatting and really messing things up. Lock down your styles on the right so that they only see the subset you want them to see, the ones that you've defined. And then, as I said, use the naming conventions for styles that are consistent with the Flare reality. And then you can even make sample text that's click and replace. And in this case, we did that. So everything you see in brackets. And let me just pull up this guy here. So here's the actual thing. I can click on any of these and then type, my new title. All this busyness you see off to the right are just comments that we added that describe the purpose, but of course your average user won't want to see that stuff, and so you may want to kind of hide that. But they can just click and just keep going, and of course they would want to. Sorry, I meant to turn this on. They would normally have paragraph styling open and be able to use those as well. So that saves a tremendous amount of time, and you can see that the interface is really quite simple. We've made it very easy for them to contribute, so something to consider. So finally, Flare in an Agile world, question mark. Basically, Agile, in my mind, is equal to modular content, which is benefited by the world of Flare, built around modular methodology. Yes, you can. You can use Flare in a very enhanced way in your Agile world, following these methods of an Agile, these methods of a content model with supporting templates and styles, and a very clean review process. So kind of a recap. You're going to develop your content model. I wouldn't rush it. I would look at what you have today. If you aren't following this kind of a method, or even if you are, it never hurts to go back and revisit. Review what your different information types are. Can you define them? Can you describe why you're using a concept type topic and what can you describe how it's meeting your customer need? And just sort of evaluate. And develop your templates and styles or enhance them to support that model. And again, that supports the authoring process, speeding things up. I can just open and click. I've got 2 weeks. And so to document those 3 or 4 features in 2 weeks, the better my process, the more defined my content model, the more defined my templates are, the quicker I'm going to be able to move through and develop content. And it's always been sort of a, sort of a challenge and goal for me to be able to, at the end of that 2-week cycle, have fully functioning documentation in line with the software. So, and finally, using the right tools and processes that enhance those contributions, whether they're authoring or reviewing. So the benefits of going Agile: using a unified content strategy and those templates, optimized tech review cycle, like we've been talking about. You can create better content faster, guaranteed. You can submit content for technical reviews in just a few clicks. If you use a tool like Contributor, that stuff goes out. They send it back. I import that into Flare, and I'm whipping through, looking at comments that were made and pulling them into my master document and working. Minimize the doc volume overall. We, at our particular company, we inherited over 2,000 pages of FrameMaker-based documentation. And it was not designed in a modular way. We had to, it was very much a book metaphor. We had to break the mold, and we're still in process of breaking the mold. We've come a very long way. But as we moved it into that model, we noticed that our doc volume, even though we're writing new content, is shrinking. And we know it needs to continue to shrink quite a bit. There's a lot of long, verbose explanations that don't match our content model. And so we're going to keep refining that process. And then, of course, importing and applying tech review changes in seconds, not hours. The quicker you can be on the turnaround time in tech review using a tool like Contributor, the better off your life will be. Free up more time for writing great content. I've been in the boat where I've been so pulled into the tool side of things of necessity to get things set up that it's left me less time to take care of documenting and enhancing, including rich information for the customer. So the sooner you get to a solid content model, the sooner you get your process for tech reviews to be smooth, slick turnaround, the quicker you're going to be able to get back to the real work of developing rich content. And to me, this is the exciting thing. The end result is that you can produce shippable documentation by the end of each sprint cycle. Following these methods, you can totally be right there, so that when they actually do the sprint demo, they can actually demo your documentation. And just most recently, I had that experience where the product manager who was doing the sprint demo, as he finished showing the features, then proceeded to show, click into the documentation and show the matching content that explained a lot of the things he had just gone over, and all of that occurred within a 2-week cycle. And so that is the big win right there. So David, I'm going to turn it over to you as we come to this MadCap slide for training.
Yes, thank you. So we have a new training course that we've just added that focuses on the MadPak Suite. That first class is going to be held August 25th and 26th. And as webinar attendees, you get a discount on any of our focused training courses, including this MadPak course. So to take advantage of this, simply contact us at our sales email, or contact us over the phone.
Cool. So here we are. This is my final slide. I hope that there was some information here that was valuable. I certainly am open to questions and comments, and can take those now or even later. So, Dave, I don't know how we go from here.
I'll send you a few here. Just sent you one over the chat function.
Okay, I think I see one here. So what sort of sprint should a TechCom team work in if they are creating content for multiple Agile teams who may be working in different sprints at different times for different release cycles? I think what you're describing there is probably more common than not. And for example, I attend on average 3 to 4. I am on 3 to 4 different sprint teams on an ongoing basis. So I go to 3 to 4 stand-ups every day, and that becomes challenging. When we first were getting into this, before we had the infrastructure we have now and the infrastructure we hope to improve and make even better on the next sprint cycles coming down the road is we made an agreement with development that we would hand off. Documentation would be one sprint behind. One sprint behind. That gave us an extra sprint to develop the same content and have it ready by the time they were done with the previous sprint. So it's the only way we could come up with to allow us to kind of deal with that overload. So I don't know if that directly answered her question, but I think that's what she's asking. Or he. Okay, so oh, do you want me to go to the next one?
Yeah, the contributor snippet comment.
Does contributor allow contributors to modify snippet content? That's a question I don't know the answer to. I know that snippets are sent out as part of the review package. So if I were to guess, David, I don't know if you have the answer to this. I would guess that you can, only because they are included in the package, but I have not tried that before.
Yes, I believe so, but I'd have to verify that with my tech support team.
Okay. All right, what if one tech writer sends out a review package, but another tech writer has to revise the topics when the review is complete? How do you share review packages among writers? We had a problem with the review package being returned, not being accepted into a different writer's project. Okay, so it sounds like it's that dilemma of I've sent out a review, and then the content is sort of changing in route. And I guess for us, the way that we avoid collisions like that is that when I get content back, I won't send out a package to writers who may be working on same content as me, because we use source control. When those comments come back from a tech review and I import them, it would be at that point that I would then share those comments with another writer, ask that writer to take a look. But in that case, my other writers, unless you're talking about other writers who are using Contributor and not Flare, other writers who are using Flare would just be able to go into the source control, pull up the changes, see them, and make their comments. So we would sort of have to manage that through process. Having writer A is done, let writer B have some time with the content. And when writer B is done, that writer checks it back into the source and so on. It's a really good question, because I don't know if real-time editing and not running over each other is a real natively supported. I've had cases where I've sent stuff out to reviewers, and then while it was out, I've kind of, in my moment of madness, have gone in and touched that topic some more. When the content comes back, Flare says, well, there's changes been made on both ends of the spectrum. You need to go through and merge these changes, and that can get tricky, particularly if I've touched stuff exactly that's touched by the reviewer and so forth. So I think it's more of a process thing at that point, just being careful that you don't step on each other's toes. And if anybody has any other ideas on that, I'd love to hear them. So I think it's a great question. Okay, another question here. Do you also create content outside the Scrum team? We are challenged to balance the external documentation needs for other teams like customer support or services while also staying current with teams. Yes, this speaks to one of my personal passions, which is the way I feel about the fact that there are content development silos in every company. And in our case, customer support sits about 75 feet away from where we sit with no walls between us, and yet they're creating content and we're creating content. And another 100 feet beyond them is the marketing team creating some usable high-level overview content that we could be taking advantage of and saving time and resources if we were all sharing. So there are other tools out there I know of that sort of allow you to kind of all content lives in a single repository. It doesn't matter whether you're in marketing or customer support or elsewhere. And as you start typing content in this tool, it will tell you, hey, there's a 90% match that somebody down the hall is using, has written the same thing. It's expensive. It takes a lot of setup time. You've got to have a dedicated tools expert there who does nothing but manage that system. I'm trying to remember the name off the top of my head. You may already have guessed it, but you can certainly Google that and find that tool. But so in the world of Flare, what we've been doing is really, again, handling it through process where we meet with customer support. We don't meet as much as we'd like to because they too are very strapped. They're understaffed. But we also subscribe to everything they publish. So we get an email when they publish a new technical article, and then it becomes a matter of me looking at it and saying, is this of value? So it's not ideal. Ideal would be that the tool I'm describing where it all goes into one repository. But short of that, it's process for us, just plugging into other people's systems, being verbal about it, trying to semi-regularly meet with them and talk about what they're doing and how can we help and how can they help and working out that way. Okay, let's see. So my developers are working right up to the end of the sprint. How do you write about those features when they're not done until the very end? Oh, I can so relate with that. It's true. As I started this presentation, I talked about the many flavors of Agile. When I say that, I was thinking, too, of culturally. Every culture of Agile is totally different. You may be in a culture where this isn't a problem. I'm guessing that this is a more common problem. For us, we're research writing and reviewing content on stuff that is mostly baked, with a realization that near the end there are going to be changes. The way I feel okay about this is the fact that the same is true of the software. They're developing that content clear up till the final hour. And when they're done, they're really not done because they can demo it, it's functional, but I guarantee, as you probably experienced too, that they're going to be changing some things and they're going to be finding bugs and tweaking some things in sprint 3, 4, 5 up till ship. And so the same is true of the documentation, but the fact is we have the nuts and bolts in place. It documents what is there, and if I do run out of time at the end, and literally it's an hour to the end of the sprint, and they just changed several things and I just found out about it, well, you do what you can do, but I already have, with the infrastructure of my content model in place, I can quickly touch that stuff and get it up to close to par until the product ships and everything really is done, if that makes any sense.
Okay, why don't we take a few more, and then we will call it a day, and we will do our best to follow up with everyone that has submitted a question.
So could you please recommend a good resource or two for content model building? There is a great book by, you may have heard of it. It's called, let's see, Building a Unified Content Strategy. Actually, if I'm not sure who's asking this question, I would be happy to find that exact resource. It's a book. When I was working at a large software company, that company took this book and thoroughly digested it and completely revamped their entire content development process and customized a tool to match this enterprise content strategy methodology. I think it's a book by Ann Wakely. I'm trying to remember her name. I will find that out and I will share that. In fact, David, if it's appropriate, I can just put that reference in the slide deck before I hand it off to you, and then people can have it. And I have to say that's one of the best books I've seen on it. I myself studied it thoroughly because that company had adopted it. I wanted to know what we were getting into. I was actually very resistant, thought it was going to kill my creativity and make life horrible, but the more I studied it and thought it through, the more I realized it's the only way to sanity in a world where we're working in sprints and there's much to do, little time to do it, and not enough resources. Where, it wasn't just a few years ago, some of you may have had, like I did, where you had doc testers and you had a graphic artist and you had editors and you had a tools team. And now you have you in a lot of cases. I know larger corporations still sport tools teams and things like that, but for many of us, that's no longer the reality. So content model, to me, became a do-or-die proposition.
Okay, well, let's do one last question, and we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Let's see. How do you record documentation tasks in the sprint? For example, do you create a separate user story for the documentation tasks, or do you include documentation in the development tasks? Not sure if I'm wording this the right way. I think you are. Does it depend on the team? So in Agile, and there again, the many flavors of Agile, I can only, of course, give you what I've experienced. For us, we have, this is all very fresh to me because we've been developing our Agile flavor over the last 18 months or so. And as we've gone through that, we've done everything from basically saying, doc this feature. That becomes a written task in the software we were using for this sprint, doc this feature, to a more granular where we'll say, create a first draft of this portion of this feature. Say there's 4 features, so create a first draft of feature 1. And then there would be another task added, technical review, feature 1. The third one would be a final draft of feature 1, and so on. And we've even added to that a previous task, a rough draft. If we have a subject matter expert who's particularly good at articulating things quickly, we may even assign that to a subject matter expert. So I don't have anything to do with that first rough draft task. Those have worked great. So I'd be very curious to know what others are doing. For us, I'm still kind of following that method of defining each of those tasks, anything that, in the Agile terminology of what constitutes a subtask, I would actually create a subtask for each of those major pieces of work I have to do to get to completion. And you may find that overkill, and it totally depends on your environment. I'm covering 3 to 4 sprints at a time. You may have 1 or 2 sprints or more than I do, so some of it depends on what you can handle and what works best in your environment. But so far, that's working okay for us. So that's my experience. So.
All right. Well, great. Well, thanks so much, Derek. Really appreciate the great webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You will receive the recording and presentation link, as I mentioned, hopefully later today or sometime tomorrow. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, David, and thanks, everybody.